My fiancé has a family tradition of spending Sundays with his ex and son leading me out. Now I've started a similar tradition with my ex, and my fiancé is not pleased about it. I'm 32 and have been engaged to Anthony, 34, for about a year. We've dated for 3 years. He has a 12-year-old son named Alex, and I have a good relationship with both of them. Anthony, his ex, and I also get along well for the most part, and I'm generally comfortable with my role. However, Anthony, his ex, and Alex have this odd tradition. Every Sunday they get together and hang out as a family. Apparently, this tradition started before Anthony and his ex divorced, and they decided to keep it going. They make breakfast, watch movies, and spend the whole day together. Honestly, I find it pretty weird. I'm not insecure about it, but I just can't understand why you would want to spend a full day every week with your ex. I expressed how strange I found it when Anthony and I first started dating. But he explained that Alex really looks forward to it, so they continued the tradition. Initially, I would stay in our room or the basement all Sunday. But I got tired of feeling like I was trapped in my own house, so I started going out for the whole day. Anthony never asked where I was going, nor did he seem to notice that I was gone. At first, I'd spend Sundays golfing, running errands, or hanging out at a bar. But then I reconnected with an old friend, Ben. Ben and I dated 5 years ago, and we stayed good friends. He recently went through a divorce and moved into a new apartment. One Sunday, when I planned to go to the movies, Ben invited me over instead. We hung out, smoked some weed, watched movies, and cooked together. It was a nice, relaxing time. Ever since then, it's become my Sunday tradition. Every Sunday, I head over to Ben's, and we spend the day together. I didn't feel the need to tell Anthony where I was going, especially since he never asked or seemed to care. But yesterday, Ben stopped by our house to drop off my phone charger because I left it at his place. Anthony asked why Ben had my charger, and that's when he found out where I'd been spending my Sundays. He asked why I was at Ben's, and I explained that it was my Sunday hangout spot. Anthony was furious, saying it was rude of me not to tell him I was hanging out with an ex. I couldn't help but laugh and pointed out the irony of him getting upset about me spending time with an ex when he's been doing the same thing every Sunday with his ex. Anthony insisted it was different because he had been honest about his relationship with his ex, and if I had an issue with it, I should have said something. I reminded him that I did bring it up before, but he said it was important for his son, Alex. I wasn't about to interfere with the highlight of his son's week just to make myself feel better. So I started spending Sundays elsewhere. Now, Anthony doesn't want me going over to Ben's anymore and told me to find another way to spend my Sundays. I told him that if we're going to play by those rules, then I don't want his ex coming over on Sundays either. Am I the a-hole now? After our argument, I thought Anthony would reflect on his hypocrisy, but he remained stubborn, insisting that I should stop seeing Ben and respect the boundaries of our relationship. That was the moment I decided I wouldn't put up with it any longer. If he could maintain a tradition with his ex, I had every right to have my own traditions, with whomever I wanted. The following Sunday, as usual, Anthony and his ex were in the living room having breakfast with Alex while I got ready to leave. Just as I was about to walk out, Anthony intercepted me, asking where I was going, as if he had only just decided to care. I looked him straight in the eye and calmly replied, "I'm going to Ben's." Same as always. His face darkened immediately, and he tried to stop me, but I left without another word. I spent the entire day with Ben, guilt-free, enjoying our peaceful routine. When I returned home that night, Anthony was waiting in the living room with his ex beside him. They both looked at me like they had something to say. Anthony and his ex had decided that it would be better for me to distance myself from Alex because, according to them, my behavior wasn't setting a good example for him. In that moment, I felt something snap inside me. It was clear that the ex was using the situation to push me out, and Anthony, like a puppet, went along with it without question. So, the solution is for me to stay away from your son so you can keep playing happy family? I asked, anger bubbling under the surface. His ex smirked, clearly pleased with herself, and that was when I realized she had always wanted me to be a disposable piece in their dynamic. And Anthony let it happen. I stood up slowly, meeting Anthony's gaze with unwavering determination. "You know what, Anthony? Keep your Sundays and your fake family. I'm done fighting for a place you never wanted me to have. I went upstairs, packed my bags, and prepared to leave. Anthony followed, begging me to stay, saying we could still work things out, but I was done with his empty promises. He had already made his choice, and it wasn't me. Once I finished packing, I texted Ben, explaining the situation. In minutes, he replied, telling me I could stay with him while I sorted things out. Without hesitation, I left the house and moved in with Ben. Sitting in his living room with a glass of wine, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in years. The following months were liberating. I ignored all of Anthony's messages and focused on building a new life with Ben. What began as a simple friendship evolved into a loving relationship, full of respect and care. For the first time in a long while, I felt truly appreciated. One day, I received a desperate message from Anthony. His ex had started dating someone new and no longer wanted to continue their Sunday tradition. Now, Anthony was lost, unsure of how to handle it. The irony of the situation was almost comical. He had prioritized that illusion of family, only to end up abandoned in the end. I replied with a simple, "You were right," and blocked his number. Over time, Ben and I built something real. While our lives moved forward, Anthony kept trying to crawl back into mine, showing up at Ben's house, begging for a second chance. But every time I saw him, I felt a quiet satisfaction in ignoring his pleas, leaving him exactly where he belonged, in the past. Not long after, I heard that Anthony lost custody of Alex. His ex claimed he wasn't emotionally fit to care for their son alone. Now, Anthony was entirely alone, without family, without support. Meanwhile, Ben and I spent our Sundays building new traditions, free from lies and illusions. And every time I think about how Anthony ended up with nothing, I can't help but smile, knowing that, in the end, he was the only one who lost control of his own life. Over the following weeks, I found myself reflecting more deeply on the events that had unfolded. I kept telling myself that Anthony had always been a good man, a caring partner, someone reliable. But as much as I tried to focus on his good qualities, the same thought kept creeping in. It was unfair. How could it be fair for him to spend weekends at his ex's house under the guise of family time, while the moment I did something similar with Ben, I was suddenly the villain? I wanted to believe that relationships were about trust and equality, but Anthony had shown me that, for him, fairness was a one-way street. At first, living with Ben seemed like a dream. I convinced myself that this new chapter was exactly what I needed. Someone who understood me. Someone who knew the weight of unresolved relationships and shared history. But slowly, that dream began to unravel. The man I thought I knew started shifting. His carefree attitude morphed into irresponsibility, and the little quirks I once found charming became exhausting demands. It started subtly, with him asking me to chip in for groceries. Then it became splitting bills, and before I knew it, he was asking for loans. I tried to be understanding. After all, he had just gone through a divorce, and I knew how hard that could be. But every loan I gave him felt less like support and more like an obligation, and the worst part? He never paid anything back. I was sinking deeper into a situation I thought would be my escape, only to find myself trapped again. One night, after a long week of work, I came home to find Ben on the couch, scrolling through his phone, a half-eaten pizza box on the coffee table. "We need to talk," he said casually, not even looking up. "About what?" I asked, already dreading what was coming next. "Look, I know things have been tight for both of us, but if you can't pitch in a little more, I might have to start charging rent." I froze. The man I had left everything behind for was now talking about charging me rent like I was just some stranger crashing at his place. I stared at him, my heart heavy with disbelief. How had I let things get this bad? How had I gone from being in a stable relationship with Anthony to living with someone who treated me like a burden? Meanwhile, Anthony's life was taking off. I saw pictures of him and Alex on social media, traveling, smiling, living a life that seemed almost too good to be true. He had won back custody of Alex and was running a successful business. It was as if everything had finally fallen into place for him. And what stung the most was that he didn't seem to miss me at all. He had moved on, while I was stuck in the exact opposite situation, with a man who now expected me to support him. the irony of it all was almost too much to bear. I left Anthony, thinking I was reclaiming my freedom, only to end up here, paying someone else's bills and being treated like a guest in what was supposed to be my new home. I wanted to scream, to cry, but more than anything, I felt a deep, bitter exhaustion. How had I ended up here? One day, while scrolling through my phone, I stumbled upon an old photo of me and Anthony, back when things were simple, back when I thought we had a future. I stared at the photo, feeling a strange mix of regret and anger. I had left because I wanted fairness, but life had given me anything but that. I packed my bags that same evening. Ben tried to stop me, throwing out empty promises of change and guilt-tripping me about how much he needed me. But I had no energy left to fight. I simply told him, "I'm done. You can find someone else to pay your rent." As I walked out the door with my suitcase in hand, I felt lighter, but not happier. I was alone again, and this time, I knew better than to hope that anyone would be waiting for me. The truth had settled deep in my bones. Men didn't change. Whether it was Anthony, who thrived without me, or Ben, who only saw me as a wallet with legs, they always found a way to prioritize themselves. And I was done being anyone's afterthought. Standing outside, I looked up at the sky, taking a deep breath. Maybe it was true. Maybe men really weren't worth it. But this time, I wasn't going to wait around for another one to prove it. From now on, I'd focus on myself. No more chasing fairness. No more waiting for someone else to do the right thing. It was time for me to be my own priority. And for the first time in a long while, that thought brought me peace. After finding myself alone again, I couldn't stop thinking about how all of this was Anthony's fault. From the very beginning, he was the root of every problem. He made me believe I was in a fair and safe relationship, all the while hiding the reality behind his facade of being a devoted father. The truth was, he never wanted to share his life with me entirely. He already had his life, his ex, his son, and their precious family Sundays. I was never a priority, just someone convenient to fill the empty spaces in between. Every day, my anger grew. I had given up everything for him, tried to understand his dynamic with his ex, and accepted things that should never have been acceptable. And what did I get in return? I was cast aside, emotionally betrayed by someone who pretended to be a good husband while secretly keeping a second life with his ex. And the worst part? Now he was in a serious relationship with another woman. One who, apparently, fit perfectly into the narrative he wanted, the kind of woman he wanted by his side to complete the picture of success he was building. I found out about it by accident. A photo of him popped up on my social media feed, shared by a mutual friend. There he was, smiling alongside a radiant woman, holding hands with Alex, like they were the perfect family. The caption? "Finally found my peace." Peace? Is that what he called peace? While I was struggling to rebuild myself from the chaos he left behind, he had moved on as if I had never existed. And that's when the injustice of it all became unbearable. Women like me, who fight to be independent, strong, and empowered, always end up paying the highest price. We strive for balance in relationships, we make space, we try to be understanding, and yet we're the ones left behind. Meanwhile, men like Anthony move on without consequence, seamlessly transitioning into new relationships, ready to continue where they left off, without any real fallout. The world is cruel to women like me. When a woman is empowered, she isn't seen as a desirable partner, she's seen as a challenge, a problem to be solved. Anthony didn't want a partner. He wanted a woman who would fit into his mold without question, someone who wouldn't demand equality, someone who would smile while he played house with his ex. And now he found exactly that. While I was alone, trying to rebuild my life from scratch, Anthony was out there living the ideal version of the life he never gave me a chance to have. It's a pain I wouldn't wish on anyone, to see the person who hurt you thrive while you're left struggling to piece your life back together. And I ask myself, why? Why do men like Anthony get away with it? Why is it so easy for them to move on, while we, the women, carry the emotional weight of everything? It's as if the world is rigged to reward those who break us and leave us behind. In the end, Anthony showed me that society still doesn't know how to deal with strong women. We're destined to carry the guilt, the anger, and the pain, while they reap the benefits of our patience and understanding. I gave everything I had to that man, accepted his terms, lived by his conditions, and still, he found happiness with someone else. And I was left behind, forced to rebuild what he had shattered. The truth is, I don't know if I can ever trust again. I tried to be someone who understood, someone who adapted, but the cost was too high. I'm tired now. Tired of searching for fairness in a world that clearly isn't fair to women like me. And maybe, finally, I'm ready to stop waiting for him, or any other man, to understand that. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know this. I will never shrink myself for anyone again. If society doesn't want an empowered woman, that's their problem. I won't change. Now, it's my turn to live life on my own terms, even if that means living it alone. Because in the end, the only person I can truly rely on is myself.